Hello and welcome to the 6th video in the mini video series on Linux Essentials. In this video series, I'm running through the top things I believe you should really know when using the Linux CLI, focusing on just core essential knowledge. In this video, we'll be looking at just one topic, which is how to find stuff on your system, such as files and folders. In a previous video, we looked at how we can find where various binaries and utilities are located, which is important for knowing what utilities are available and where they are at the command line. But in this video, we'll go an extra step and look at how we can very quickly find pretty much anything on our system via the command line interface. Okay, so that's what's on the menu for this video. Let's head over to my desktop then and get started with looking at the find utility. But as always, before I do, I just want to raise to your attention my Patreon account. If you're interested in accessing videos that aren't available on YouTube, would like one-to-one support for issues you're having relating to my course, or if you would just like to support my work, please do visit my Patreon account. It would be very much appreciated. Okay, so here we are on my desktop, ready to go in my bash terminal in my userpi's home directory as normal. So firstly, let's find a file on the system here as a demonstration to talk around. So as an example, let's find a Python interpreter, which is a binary file that I know will contain the string Python. I'm using this example just because I know there are plenty of possible results which will be returned by this search, which will help me to demonstrate the find utility. So the objective of this demo search is going to be to return all matches of files and directories containing the word Python. I'm going to do this by using an asterisk on either side of the search term Python in order to say that we don't care if Python exists at the start, middle or end of the file or directory name, so long as it exists somewhere. So we're going to be about as general as we can be. So let's do that with the find utility as our first foray into finding content on our system in this way. We're going to look inside the user bin directory. That's because I know there will be, for certain, a Python interpreter in there. And I want to make sure this is a controlled test. So I'm going to type in find, because the find utility is what we're going to be using. I'm then going to tell find where I want to look. So I'm going to go /user/bin. Now there's nothing special about this, I just am using this as an example. I happen to know in the user binary directory there will be some Python interpreters. Next I'm going to use an option called name, and this tells find I wish to look for a string, or a name in this case, which is as follows. I'm going to encapsulate it in speech marks, which I have to do. I'm going to use an asterisk to say anything before this point. I'm going to type in Python, and then I'm going to use another asterisk to say anything after this point. So just to reiterate, I'm using the find utility, and therefore I'm using find at the start here. I'm telling it I want to search within the user bin directory, and I'm saying I'm going to define the name I want to search for to be Python, and I don't care if there's something in front of the Python string, and I don't care if there's something after the Python string, so long as it contains Python somewhere. Let's press enter. Okay, so you'll see here the result of the find utility is showing us all files and directories which match the search criteria within the user bin directory. If we add a type F to the end of this command, we can actually filter out directories to make sure we're just getting files if that's what we want. Now in my example case, that is what I want because I know that I'm looking for a Python interpreter, which is a file. So let's do that as follows. I'm going to use the up key to get the last command I had. I'm then going to add what I mentioned. I'm going to add the option type, and I'm going to say F for file. Press enter. Okay, a much shorter list. Similarly, if I wanted to, I could filter out the files and just have the directories returned. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to press the up key and I'm going to swap F for file to D for directory. So I only want to return directories, and therefore I want to filter out any files. If I press enter, there we go. So in this case, within the user bin directory, there are no directories containing the string Python anywhere. So you can see this is quite powerful already, but it is only really working so neatly for us because I know that Python interpreters exist generally in the user bin directory. So in a way, as I mentioned, I'm kind of cheating because I know this is a place where I will find them. Let's now demonstrate what will happen if I go up a level and be a little bit less specific. And I'm going to pretend that I don't know this information. I'm going to assume that I know it's somewhere in the user directory, but I don't know where. So to do that then, I'm going to press up on the keyboard. I'm going to get rid of the type specification. And I'm just going to go back to where I've got a path here, and I'm going to delete the binary component of the path. So I'm just looking anywhere inside the user's directory. Okay. So you can see that if we don't narrow down the search for the find utility by pointing it as closely as we can to where we think the file is going to be, we can be overwhelmed with results. This is generally only true, however, if using a search string so general as I am currently, which is currently saying go find the string Python anywhere in the file or directory name, in both files or directories, for any user and any aged file. In addition, in this particular case, we're using the search string Python, which is a very common string in Linux. So all in all, with this level of ambiguity in our search, we must expect a lot of results. So let's now find out just how many results we actually had. We can do this by piping the result of the search query into the word count utility. So let's do that now. I'm going to press up to get the last query. I'm going to use a pipe, which is shift on my keyboard and backslash, which gives me the pipe symbol. I'm going to pipe it into word count, and I'm going to provide word count with an option -L. So in this course so far, we haven't covered pipes. A pipe is simply saying take the output from the command on the left of the pipe and put it into the input of the command on the right. It's incredibly simple and powerful. So we're saying take the list that's going to come out of find and pipe it into the input of word count. Now word count as a utility will perform a word count, but by providing it with the -L option, it'll just count the number of lines returned. And as you can see by the query that was returned above this line, you can see that we get a new line for every result. So the result of this command with the pipe is simply to say how many returned results were there. So I'm going to press enter. Okay. So there were 6,256 results. That's far too many. So let's narrow this down a little by telling find that we want the files only. After all, we are after a Python interpreter, which is a binary file and not a directory. So we'll do this as we did before by adding a type F. So up on my keyboard, let's keep word count in for now because I want to see how we reduce it down. And I'm going to say type F and press enter. Great. So that's reduced it down a little bit. And now let's go a bit further and say that we want Python, the search string, to be at the start of the file name, and tell the find utility that the string can't be anywhere in the file name, it must be at the start. We can do this very simply by removing the leading asterisk. So I'll press up, go back to my search term, and I'm going to remove the leading asterisk. So I'm saying I'm looking for a file somewhere in the user directory that has at the start of the file name the word Python. I'm going to keep the pipe to word count in there because at the moment I just want to see how many we're getting. So press enter. Excellent, great. So that's much better. I mean, we're still getting a very large number of results, but you can see by adding some specificity here, we're getting a much more reasonable return. Now, the reason why we're still getting so many results is because Python is a very general term in a Linux operating system, particularly when searching through an entire user directory. So let's reduce this a little further by saying I know I'm after Python 3.7 exactly. This is a particular version of Python, so for that I'm going to do the following. I'm going to press the up key again. I'm going to remove the asterisk which says any string after Python is suitable, and I'm going to replace it very specifically with Python 3.7. So now I press enter, and we're getting just 3 results. Okay, so let's now remove the pipe and see what we got. So we can see that by being less specific with the location, but more specific with the search criteria, we've got a decent result, and I've found what I wanted. I'm finding here 3 instances of Python interpreters, and this one in particular is the one that will run when we run Python 3.7. So remember that we can define how general we want to be with our search by adding or removing asterisks from the search. We should also, where possible, be as specific as we can with the string we're searching for, as we've seen. We should definitely tell the find utility if we're after files or directories, because that helps, as we've seen. And finally, we should be as specific as possible on the directory we're searching within. So in this case, we're searching through the whole user directory, but if I'd pointed at the binary directory, we wouldn't have needed to have been so specific. Okay, right. So can we improve this any further? Well, find is actually a very powerful tool, particularly in combination with pipes, and you can do an awful lot with it. But to keep in alignment with this course being an essentials course only, I won't go too deep, but there are a couple of quick and easy additions I want to bring to your attention to the find utility before we wrap it up. Firstly then, you can search by user ownership of a file or directory using the user option as follows. So I'm just going to go up on the keyboard to get my last command. I'm then going to add the option -user. And then let's say I'm looking for root as the user root. Okay, there we go. So those files actually happen to be owned by root anyway, so that's why we're returning the same ones. But that's how you can be more specific and say that you're searching for a file where you know who the owner should be. Now in this course I haven't yet covered user ownership of files and directories. There's actually something in the next video we're going to cover. But suffice to say, files and folders must be owned by somebody, either you, another user, or the super user root. If we know who owns the file, it may help us narrow down our search. Secondly and finally, you can also search by recency of file modification, which is really useful if you know the file you're after was recently modified. For example, to demonstrate this, let's very quickly create a file called file_age_test in my user's home directory. This can be done easily using the touch command, which creates an empty file. So I'll do that now, touch home directory /file_age_test. Okay, now let's search for it. Find /home/py. I could have just used the tilde, but I thought I'd do it a bit differently, just to keep demonstrating different ways of doing things. -name in order to provide a search string, and then file age test. Okay, great, we can see it. But now let's find it only if it's less than 1 minute old. I'll do this by adding a -mmin -1 to the previous command as follows. So I'll use the up key, I'll add -mmin and then -1 to the end. So the -mmin, the -mmin command says only if the file was modified less than a minute ago will I show it. Okay. We can still see it, of course, in this search we've just done, because the file is indeed less than a minute old when I pressed enter. But once the file is over 1 minute old, which it will be probably in a matter of seconds from now, I should find my search returns nothing. So let's try this command again to confirm that once the file is older than 1 minute, we no longer see the result. So let's see what happens as I do this. Ah, excellent. I thought I might have to do it a few times there, but actually a minute has elapsed. Okay, great. So we've covered quite well how you can search for files and directories on your Linux machine by being as general or specific as you want. I've also shown you how to restrict the search based on user ownership, modification recency, and whether we're after files or directories. So before we finish, let's talk about finding files that contain specific text. There is a brilliant utility that everybody who uses Linux knows very well called grep, which stands for Globally Search a Regular Expression and Print. It allows us to find text in a file by searching through the file until the text is found. It can also search recursively through loads of files in case you're not sure which file contains the text. So this might be really useful if one day you forget the name of a file, but know for certain it contains certain text. You can use this to find out where it is. In combination with the find utility, you have, with grep, pretty much everything you need to search for content on your Linux system. So let's have a quick look at the grep utility. So as an example, I'm going to navigate into a directory I created as part of my DIY hosting course called website. So I'll go into that now and have a look inside. So in here I can see a Docker file. I know that Docker file contains the word WordPress. But let's confirm that by using grep as our first introduction to the grep utility. We do it as follows. Grep, that's the name of the utility, -- for an option to be explicitly defined with a word, and I'm going to use the word colour. Now as I'm British I spell it with a U, but it would work equally if you spelt it like that. I'm now going to search for the term WordPress because I know that the Docker file will contain the word WordPress, and I want to search in the Docker file. So what we've got here is the utility. I want to colour the result, so I include the colour option, but then I provide it with the search term followed by the file I want to search inside. So that's the order we're going to be running this in. Press enter, and there it is highlighted in red. So with grep used in this way, any instance of the search string in the file, even if it's part of something else, will be found, and the whole line will be returned, printed to the CLI with the found string highlighted, as can be seen. As mentioned previously, we can also search through a whole directory if we use the -r flag for recursive, and define a directory as a search path instead of a file as an argument to grep. But be careful about this, because it depends how large your directory is as to how quickly it will work, as grep will have to search through all files sequentially and it could take a long time. But let's see what happens in this case. So I'm going to press up on the keyboard to get my previous command. I'm going to change Docker file to a period, because this means the current directory I'm in. And I'm then going to add a -r for recursive. Press enter. Excellent. So we can see here, because we've searched through a whole directory, grep is very kind to us and has returned the results along with the file that they have come from. So we have one from website conf, we have one from Docker file, and we have quite a few from a Docker compose YAML file. You can imagine then just how useful this can be. You can find a searched string in a range of files and it'll give you all of the instances back, which can be highly useful. So let's pretend now that I've forgotten where the heck I put my website on my Linux system. I know it'll be somewhere in my home directory because that's where I put things, but I don't know where. Well, let's use grep to find out. So let's say I know that one of the files is definitely a Docker file for WordPress and therefore must contain the term from WordPress : with a version I can't remember. So let's search on those terms. So it doesn't matter that I'm in the website directory because I won't be searching as though I'm in it. So let's forget the fact I'm in it at the moment. I'm going to type in grep. I'm going to colour it because I like to colour my results. I'm going to then search for the following: from WordPress : Now, like I say, I just know that this is a Docker file. I'm pretending that I know it's a Docker file somewhere and that it's for WordPress. Therefore, I know that it's going to have that string in it somewhere. but I don't know where, so I'm going to say anywhere inside my user's home directory, which I'm going to define in this case with the tilde character. I'm then going to use the -r flag to say recursive. So this command is saying use grep, colour the results. This is the search string I'm looking for in any file inside my user's home directory. And I'm going to say you can do this recursively with the -r. So I'm going to press enter. Okay, that's great. You can see here that it has told me not only that it exists, which is great, but also where it is. Just here. That is exactly what I was hoping for, because I'm assuming that I didn't know where it was. Now, be careful with this, as I've mentioned. It just so happens that my home directory for the user Pi isn't very large, so it doesn't take an age to search in this way. But if you're searching across a large directory, particularly one with lots of small files, doing so with grep may take a very long time. But nonetheless, it will find what you're looking for. It is incredibly powerful. Something else to note here before I move on from this command is that because I had a space in my search string, I had to encapsulate the search in speech marks. So as a little bit of extra information, it's worth you knowing, if you don't already, that in most command line interactions in Linux, if you have a space, the solution is almost always going to be to encapsulate in speech marks. There are exceptions when you'll need to do something called escaping the spaces, but most of the time, speech marks will solve the problem. Okay, so that's it on how to find things super quickly in a Linux CLI environment. There are more things to know about grep and more things to know about find, so if you're interested, do Google these things or look for more comprehensive courses. But I think in terms of the 99% use cases, I've shown you what you can do with grep and what you can do with find, which will allow you to search your operating system at the command line very efficiently. And if your use case doesn't quite fit with what I've demonstrated, at least you know where to look. Just have a Google and see if the grep and find utilities can do what you need in a more specific way. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it insightful and useful, and if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I'd very much appreciate it. It keeps me making these videos, and please do check out my Patreon account if you'd like to contribute. Okay, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video where I'll be talking about system permissions, ownership of files, chown, chmod, and how to give users groups. Okay, I'll see you there.